Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. As we've been talking about now for a few years, all the money printing and malinvestment leads to countries and economies just completely shutting down. That's what we're seeing. Stacy.
Right. I might add that now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the new set of Keiser Report. I've had a little bit of a bordello twist here, some flowers, some red lights behind us.
Oh, it's lovely. Fantastic. I feel the warmth, cuddly embrace of your rhetoric.
So the warm, cuddly embrace is really needed for this winter. Energy crisis grips the world. Lebanon runs out of power. India warns its coal-fired plants could go dark in just 3 days. Blackouts hit China and gas prices soar in Europe. Lights go out in Lebanon as biggest two power stations shut due to fuel shortage. Energy network unlikely to be restored for several days, according to officials. Meanwhile, some Chinese provinces are rationing electricity amid crisis. Europeans are paying exorbitant prices for liquefied natural gas, and India is low on coal. And it came as the world leaders prepared to meet in Glasgow for the COP26, the climate change accord.
Right. So what's happening in Lebanon, what's happening in India is a failure of free market competition. So free market competition has been with us for 100,000 years or longer, 400,000 years. It's what defines humanity. It what makes humans different than other species of animals on planet Earth. And over the past 40 years, we've seen a replacement of free market competition with the command and control of central bankers who have destroyed the value of society, both in the money, but also any kind of institutional value. They destroyed religion, they've destroyed education, they've destroyed medicine, and now we have complete chaotic free-for-all, and countries and economies are going to start to shut down, close down, and the ensuing chaos could have been avoided had they watched the Keiser Report and heeded our words.
Right, and the thing is, yes, the winter of our discontent made glorious by glorious summer. You know, the fact is that we may see better times because of a harder money coming, right? Bitcoin is on the horizon, and it's kind of exposed all of these shenanigans since 2008. And that's when Bitcoin was first birthed in the white paper. So, you know, a lot of this stuff is just being made obvious on stage as these players strut and fret the hour, you know, in interventions and trying to control things. And, you know, with these energy crises gripping the world, part of it's all due to the reaction, right, to the pandemic, you know, the C word, which you can't mention because we'll be censored for it. But the fact is that, you know, the consequences of all the money printing, the consequences of locking down and having a shortage of workers, this is causing the knock-on effect of the shortage of energy. And on top of that, you had all the sanctions and the weaponized settlement layer grid that was already in place and getting worse and worse since 2008, 2009. That's when 2009, I believe, was the first time, for example, that Obama took Iran off the SWIFT system. So these are all the consequences, the ripple effect of the, you know, the crises emerging all over the place represents, it's a trickle out of the chaos at the center.
Yes, entropy will always enforce its physical dimensions because it's one of the overriding rules of the universe, is that things tend to degrade entropically into atomization and particleization. And it requires a great effort by society and its institutions to fight entropy and to create societal cohesion. But unfortunately, over the past 40 years during the central bank era, the incredible corruption that we've seen has now utterly destroyed all society. I think Margaret Thatcher was probably correct when she said there is no society, and we really have none anymore. So we're being replaced now with a Bitcoin standard. And what arises from the Bitcoin standard in terms of what we will recognize and call civilization, that's yet to be determined. We really don't know yet.
America is choking under an everything shortage. That's a story from The Atlantic, and it catalogs the same thing, all the shortages across the entire economy, and it blames the lockdowns, but also all the money printing as a result of the lockdowns. When you're locked down, when you're not producing goods and services, you have to create value with all that money printing. Otherwise, everybody's just getting more money to chase the same available goods and services, which were shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, which as everybody locked down and locked home, and everybody around the world got free money. So we're chasing the same goods. I'm going to show you this email I received, part of the email that I received from a family farm. I think it was in Indiana, and we had ordered some meat from them early on in the pandemic a year and a half ago. And this is that they talk about the inflation hitting them hard as a family farm, a real family farm, not one of these factory farm, big conglomerates. How inflation is impacting our farm, read the email. And they mentioned increases for non-GMO grain. The non-GMO feed for our pigs and chickens represents our largest input cost for raising these animals. And this year we've absorbed price spikes as high as 20% above expected cost. And the cost spikes on packaging materials such as boxes have risen over 35% since a year ago. And we've absorbed multiple price spikes on dry ice and insulation materials. Due to labor shortages, the cost of delivery has also increased throughout the year.
Right. Okay. So just to review, the inflationary pressures have been building for decades, but they were not always obvious to the middle class because as wealth was transferred from the bottom to the top through the machinations of the corrupt central banks, the lower classes and the poor people were increasingly marginalized and victimized and vilified, famously by Hillary Clinton, who called them the deplorables. Right, those are the victims of Jamie Dimon and the central banks. But now the inflation is now creeping into the middle class. And so now it's a crisis suddenly because the person who might be ordering from a private farm, privately grass-fed beef tenderloins and, butter made from cows getting a daily massage, okay, those prices are now going up. And now those people who are in the media class, in the legal class, in the doctor class, right, those people are like squawking, oh my God, what's going on here? It's inflation. So that now it's much, much too late to stop. It's going much higher. Food prices will very quickly now double and triple.
So now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by, the future. That's the American dream, really. Like, okay, times might be horrible, but things are going to get better. So there's a notion that we have transitory inflation, things are going to get better. Don't worry. There's also the children, the future, like the future job prospects. We were told, for example, that, okay, we don't need dirty manufacturing jobs here. That's low value added. We're going to send those overseas and we're going to do the services sector. You could work from home. You don't even need to do anything. You just need to think. And we're uniquely, a shining city on a hill sort of country, and we can just think better. Well, services also, in the latest trade deficit, we have a services deficit. So that's also declining. But so in terms of the inflation cost and the reaction, the lockdowns and all of this stuff that we've done without thought, and we're not even allowed to have a conversation about this. We're not allowed to discuss the C word anywhere in the areas where we meet. The modern day beer hall, the modern day coffee shop is the internet, is social media, is places like Twitter. So I want to read the story coming out of the US in terms of school children are just starting to return after 18 months of no education, right? For some reason, we mentioned it earlier that I thought, like, surely this is going to have some sort of consequence, particularly on the most vulnerable, most important period before they go to middle school. So before, up until 5th grade. Well, when 4th graders can't read, Phoenix school battles pandemic learning loss. Students return to in-person learning with diminished reading skills, putting them 2 grade levels behind. So they highlight this class outside of Phoenix in a working class area. Their parents were all frontline workers. They were construction workers. They were, sewage and electricians and drivers and stuff like that. So they always had to work. They weren't home to work from home with the children who had to do online classes. So they have 4th graders. These are 9-year-olds, right, who couldn't spell rub, R-U-B. They couldn't even spell that. They had to work through them how to spell that. So this is the level of reading comprehension, which was very shocking. And we'll go into some of the details, in particular, that it was the frontline workers' children's, i.e. Black and brown children, who were hit the hardest, like way harder. So we'll see that data too.
Yeah, no, it's remarkably cruel when a society abandons its children. I think that's a hallmark of a certain nihilism that we see creeping into our American society and other societies and economies around the world. They're literally throwing children into the volcano to try to get the money printing gods to print more money. And obviously that's not a healthy situation, but it is the state of affairs now.
Well, we have a neoliberal sort of system which has externalized costs for years, decades now, 50 years exactly since the US dollar turned 50, as it is the all-fiat global system. In August of 1971 it started. Well, we've been able to externalize those costs and keep on rolling over the debt all the way down to 0% interest rates, and we've been able to hide everything. So now we're at this point where we're not allowed to discuss the consequences. We're a society that no longer addresses costs. So is this a cost that we should consider? Should we concern ourselves that these kids, these 7, 8, 9-year-olds are going without any education? And importantly, without any socialization either. So do we need to concern ourselves with this? And they point out that the math scores, for example, math achievement dropped by 12 percentile points before pandemic to now, and 6 percentiles for the reading. But in terms of, this notion of the what you see in the media here in the United States, blue check media, the social justice warrior, and that we need to do something and we're all white supremacists. Well, look at the results of their actual actions they've decided. But the drop in reading scores among Black and Latino fourth grade students was on average double that of white and Asian American students. And at the same time, among fourth graders, a critical juncture in education, students from high poverty schools experienced 3 times as much learning loss in reading compared with those enrolled in low poverty schools.
Right, well, a lot of what's taught in school now is brand differentiation, so that kids know the difference between different branded consumer products. If they can't really distinguish the difference, then it's all commodity-driven consumer products, and none of these big corporations are going to be able to have a premium on their products, and they're all going to go bankrupt. So they're just killing the seed corn, right? I mean, you've been training these kids to become addicted to your junk for years. They're so stupid now, you can't even get them addicted to your junk anymore, American. You cuckoo. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Mark Moss. He's got a podcast that's now airing on iHeartRadio. Sounds good. Hey, Mark, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Max. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
All righty. Now, Mark, you've got the gift of the clairvoyant. In 2020, when you predicted we would see an energy crisis, that prediction seems to be coming true. What's going on?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is coming true. It's not a prediction I would have liked to see come true. But, basically what happened is September of last year, 2020, I was down in Mexico. I was living in California. I was down in Mexico in a little tiny town surfing, one paved road, and the electricity worked fine. But while I was gone in California, they kept having these rolling blackouts. And so I got home and I started looking at it, and I made a video predicting it. And I said, what's happening in California is coming for the country and the rest of the world. And the reason why I was able to predict that, not because I had a crystal ball, it's because it's happening over policy. So in California specifically, they want to be the model for the rest of the United States. And so they have set these very aggressive standards of moving away from fossil fuels and moving into clean renewables. And so they had these crazy mandates, and they literally started shutting down the power plants, the energy plants. They shut down the natural gas plants. They shut down 2 out of the 3 nuclear reactors. And, we'll move to renewables. Of course, we don't have those yet, but, eventually we will. In the meantime, we'll just borrow from our neighbors of Arizona and Nevada. But of course, when California needs a lot of electricity, so do they. There's none to go around. And so the blackouts are being caused by policy. And I knew that those policies would be going to the rest of the world, which they are, which is why I predicted it, and which is exactly why we're having an energy crisis all over the world today.
Wow, it sounds crazy. Politicians often vote for what they deem to be a good idea without really thinking through the economics. And this is a recurring problem. But when it comes to energy and your economic illiteracy is so grave that you accidentally turn off the state's energy. But what you're saying is that this is going on all over the world.
It's literally going all over the world. I mean, we're seeing all throughout Europe big time problems, natural gas, electricity. So natural gas is in short supply. The prices are up 800%. They're worried that, winter's coming in Europe and it gets very cold in some parts and people might not have enough natural gas to even heat their homes, which could be a very big problem. And then, because of these are complex systems, what happens is they try to affect one thing and they don't take into account all the other problems. So when natural gas gets in shortage, and then of course prices spike from that, well then the natural gas that's used to create the electricity, the prices start spiking, the companies go out of business. And what's interesting is they had just met. The UN is having a big meeting coming up, but they just did a pre-meeting, I think, a week or two ago. And good old Boris from the UK said that we want to make the UK the example. That's what he said. And so I thought, wow, how rich that they want to be the example, because the UK is literally in the worst shape out of all. They're taking kind of a play out of California, which is let's shut down all our natural gas and then we'll borrow from France. But they didn't get as much from France as they were hoping to. They've also moved a lot to quote unquote renewables, or maybe we'll call them unreliables, which is wind. And oh shoot, we kind of had a low wind year. We didn't produce enough wind. Now they're sitting on massive amounts of natural gas reserves. They could get it out of the ground if they want to, but they don't. And so they're literally causing these problems to themselves.
Right. Well, the UK is certainly setting themselves up to be an example of stupidity, and I think everyone now knows it. But let's move on to a country that is setting a new example for excellence and foresight, and that would be El Salvador. They're mining Bitcoin with volcano energy, which is virtually free. Colombia is proposing to mine Bitcoin using waterfall energy. It seems Bitcoin fixes these energy markets. You've been down there. You've had boots on the ground, so to speak. What's going on?
Yeah, so what's going on in El Salvador is awesome. I think, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of opinions. I try to separate some of maybe what's going on the politics side, because I don't really know enough about what happens in their own internal politics to comment, but we can look at Bitcoin separately, and it's doing a lot of amazing things. First, to your point, mining Bitcoin on volcano energy. And what's really cool about that is if you look back through history, which I love to look back through history, you can see that a wealth of a nation is usually been dependent on the natural resources that they have. Of course, if they can get them out of the ground, like Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia, but they can't get it out of the ground right now. But in El Salvador, they don't really have any natural resources. I mean, they have, coconuts, but they do have a volcano. And of course, the volcano with the heat can produce electricity. Now, typically that electricity would be stranded and they wouldn't be able to use it for anything. But what Bitcoin does, and this is where most people that argue against Bitcoin using too much energy don't understand, is that Bitcoin needs to have very, very, very low electricity prices, and Bitcoin is able to go directly to the energy source. And so because of that, it doesn't go to the areas that people are competing for it where it's needed. It goes to where there's excess energy. And so it can go right to the volcano, and it can use the energy from the volcano to mine Bitcoin. And then that Bitcoin could be transported to other markets to pay for other things. Now, some people might say, well, why don't they just use the volcano to give all the poor people of El Salvador power? And the reason is because you can't really transport the power that way, which is why it's so important for Bitcoin to be mined there. And what's even a bigger story, I think, for the future, we'll see how this plays out. But then imagine like all through the South Pacific. I'm a surfer, so I've traveled all through there. You have all these little islands that have no natural resources. But guess what? They got volcanoes too. And they could also start mining Bitcoin. And I think over the next decades, we'll see the entire world geography kind of start to shift based off these natural resources that are now available to them.
Right. Excellent point that the energy from the volcano, to get it to the population, as we know, with the transportation of energy, it's inefficient, and it ends up losing a tremendous amount of economic benefit just in the transmission. But if you're converting the energy from the volcano directly into Bitcoin, Bitcoin then has an impact on the economy that is really unmatched by anything else we've ever seen in hundreds of years. The people that are using the Chivo wallet down in El Salvador, they got $30 free when they launched. And now we see that the population is on a net basis adding to that wallet more than they're spending. So they're becoming hyper-Bitcoinized, they're becoming savers, they're becoming hard money astute folks. And so the whole population, whether or not, I liken the leader Bukele to George Washington. He wasn't popular to the English back in the 1700s either, but he managed to forge a new nation. So Bukele in El Salvador, he's not popular with the IMF or the CIA or the FBI, but he's forging a new nation on the concept of hard money and freedom. And we see it happening in a very compressed amount of time, Mark. This all happened, very quickly. I think that's shocking. It's even shocking to me, the speed at which this is happening.
Yeah, they've really got the population using it. Which, of course, hey, download the wallet, get $30 in free Bitcoin. I would have downloaded that too. But that's an amazing story in itself. And for those people that held on to their Bitcoin, yeah, they've seen it go up in value almost double since then. But there's even a bigger story that's going on. And like I said, I'm a surfer. I've traveled to all these remote locations chasing waves. I know you guys are world travelers as well. And there's something about you need to go there and get the perspective. And I kind of got into this little thing on Twitter earlier with someone today, and they were talking about how privileged people are thinking about this cryptocurrency. And I said, you sound privileged, and maybe you've never been to a third world country. So when I went down to El Salvador, and I've been there many times in the past surfing, but I didn't really understand this problem, which is that just like in most places like the United States, it costs money to have a checking account, a bank account. Of course, if you carry a balance, typically those bank accounts get kind of wiped out, But in El Salvador, they don't have a lot of money, and so they don't have the balances, and so they have to pay anywhere from $25 to $50 per month to have a bank account. And they make $100 or $200 a month. So how can they afford to pay that? And the answer is, of course, they can't. And so most of the people, or a lot of the people, at least where I was, don't have bank accounts, which means they're not into the financial system, the global financial system. They can't receive or send digital payments. And so how could there ever be equality if they're not able to do that? It's a big problem. But also the other side is the same way. So you have lots of little, roadside stands that sell pupusas and coconuts, and the bodegas that sell water, et cetera. But unless they have about $15,000 to $20,000 a month of revenue, they can't get a point of sale system, a merchant account. And so the merchants aren't able to get into the digital ecosystem, the financial system, and neither are the people. So basically, they're all out. And now today, they download a Chivo wallet, they have Bitcoin, the merchants can accept digital payments, the people have digital payments, and the story's more than just Bitcoin, which obviously it is about Bitcoin, but it's that now all of the people and the merchants are instantly brought into the global financial system, and that is a really big deal.
Right, it's having an impact on the Wall Street banks. Reports are that Jamie Dimon's seen in East Hampton, shivering and shaking, begging for Bitcoin. And, I told him to buy it when it was under $10. But JP Morgan says that their institutional clients are dumping gold and buying Bitcoin. Oh, my gosh. Is this the end for gold, Mark?
Well, in 2008, I got hit really hard. I was heavy in real estate in California, and that wasn't a good place to be. As I started to learn about this financial system, I did become a gold bug, and I thought gold was a good solution. What I realize now is I was just a sound money advocate. It's a little bit disappointing to see what's going on with gold personally. I mean, I've basically switched over to Bitcoin as well. But you would think, if there was ever a time in history where gold was needed and gold was going to work, it would be right now. It'd be over this last year with uncertainty at all-time highs, volatility. Trillions of dollars being printed, left and right. You would think gold would respond, and it hasn't. And so because of that, unfortunately, it's like if it doesn't work now, I don't know if it ever will. And apparently, the institutional clients are seeing the exact same thing. We've even seen reports from JP Morgan and from Citibank both saying that they expect Bitcoin to overtake gold. And so it's looking like that's probably going to happen.
Right. That would imply a $10 trillion market cap or over $500,000 per Bitcoin. What about a Bitcoin ETF? Does this matter to this trend toward hyper-Bitcoinization?
Well, first, I'm not a big fan of the ETF. I would prefer if it didn't happen. And the reason why is because basics, supply and demand. What we want is people buying Bitcoin, and that brings the supply down, the demand up, and then the price would continue going up. When they have an ETF and they can start buying paper Bitcoin, like the gold market, about 500 paper ounces to 1 physical ounce, it starts to mess with the gold price, which is maybe part of what we're seeing today. And so I think it would be better without this ETF. However, the Wall Street financialization wants to have it happen. But I think at this point, I don't know if it's going to be that big of a deal, because we already have ETFs in other countries. So the institutional clients that were waiting for the ETF have probably found other ways to get in by now. But I think it'll have some effect. I seen reports yesterday saying there's maybe a 75% chance that we see one get through this year. So I think it'll have some effect. Probably not as big as people expect. But in the long run, I'm not super excited about it.
Oh, boy, this is great. Got to have you on another segment. But for now, thanks for being on Keiser Report.
Thank you.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Want to thank our guest, Mark Moss. Until next time, bye, y'all.